The moment his finger cut through the air, pointing straight at the man in the tailored suit, everything seemed to freeze, the clinking glasses inside the restaurant, the soft hum of conversation, even the warm daylight that bathed the entrance. It was the kind of moment that divides life into before and after. And no one standing there, not the nervous hostess, not the sharply dressed manager, not even the woman in the wheelchair, realized just how much was about to change. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and standing up for what's right even when it's uncomfortable, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Echoes the Stories. Stories like this remind us who we can be at our best. It was a bright afternoon, the kind that made the city feel softer than usual. Sunlight spilled across polished sidewalks, and people moved in unhurried rhythms, dressed in their weekend best. Just outside the restaurant's glass doors, Elian Torres stood beside a wheelchair, his arm gently wrapped around the shoulders of the woman seated in it. His daughter, Maris, clung quietly to his side, her small hand gripping his jacket. The woman in the wheelchair, Sorelle Vance, carried herself with a quiet dignity that didn't beg for attention but commanded respect anyway. Her pale pink dress draped elegantly over her legs, though they remained motionless beneath the fabric. Her posture was upright, her expression composed, but there was something in her eyes, a shadow of something she had learned to live with. The hostess had smiled at first. A rehearsed, polite smile. But it faltered the moment she took in the wheelchair. Something changed in the air then. Subtle, but unmistakable. There had been whispers, then hesitation, then the manager appeared. He spoke in hushed tones at first, glancing nervously toward the diners inside as if afraid someone important might notice the disruption. And then, with a stiffness that felt more rehearsed than sincere, he explained that the restaurant was fully booked and not equipped to accommodate certain needs. Sorelle had heard it all before. The careful phrasing. The soft rejection wrapped in politeness. She didn't argue. She simply nodded, her hands resting still in her lap. But Elian didn't nod. Because Elian Torres had spent the last 4 years learning what it meant to fight quietly, persistently, and without apology. He hadn't planned on being a single father. Life had torn that choice from him in a single night he still couldn't fully speak about. Since then, every day had been a balancing act, working long hours as a mechanic, raising Maris, and carrying grief that never quite left but softened around the edges with time. He knew what it meant to be overlooked. To be dismissed. To be told, in ways both subtle and blunt, that you didn't quite fit. And something about the way Sorelle had lowered her gaze, accepting the rejection like it was routine, struck something deep inside him. So when the manager turned away, assuming the matter was settled, Elian stepped forward. That was when he pointed. Not aggressively. Not wildly. But with a quiet firmness that demanded attention. The kind of gesture that says, no. This isn't over. The manager turned back, startled. People inside the restaurant began to notice now, their conversations dipping into curious silence. Elian didn't raise his voice, but every word carried weight. He spoke about fairness. About dignity. About how accessibility isn't a favor, it's a basic human right. His voice didn't tremble, even though his heart pounded. Because this wasn't just about a restaurant. It was about every moment someone had been made to feel less than. Maris looked up at him, her eyes wide but steady. She had seen her father like this before. Not angry, but unyielding. Sorelle, for the first time, looked directly at him. There was surprise there. And something else. Something softer. The manager tried to maintain composure, but cracks began to show. He repeated policies. Apologized without meaning it. Suggested alternative arrangements that felt more like dismissals than solutions. And still, Elian didn't back down. Minutes passed, but they felt longer. The sunlight shifted slightly, casting longer shadows across the entrance. Inside, diners had stopped pretending not to watch. And outside, something unexpected was unfolding, not just a confrontation, but a quiet reckoning. Eventually, the manager stepped aside, his tone changing. Not entirely sincere, but no longer dismissive. He offered to see what could be done. It wasn't a victory. Not yet. But it was movement. Elian stepped back, his arms still protectively around Sorelle's shoulders. He didn't look at her for approval. He hadn't done it for recognition. But when he finally met her gaze, he saw it. Gratitude. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just real. They were eventually guided inside, though the atmosphere had shifted. It wasn't entirely welcoming, but it was no longer rejecting. And as they sat at their table, something unspoken settled between them. Time passed. Plates arrived. Maris laughed at something small and innocent. The tension slowly melted into something quieter. But the story didn't end there. Because what Elian didn't know, what no one in that restaurant knew, was that Sorelle Vance wasn't just another guest. She was the founder and CEO of a rapidly growing company that had quietly been reshaping industries, known not just for innovation but for its commitment to inclusion and accessibility. She had built it from nothing, after an accident had changed her life forever. After doors had closed. After people had underestimated her more times than she could count. And she had never forgotten what that felt like. She had come to that restaurant that afternoon not just for a meal, but for something else, a quiet evaluation. A test of how far society had really come. The answer had been disappointing. Until it wasn't. Because of one man who refused to look away. In the days that followed, things began to change in ways no one could have predicted. The restaurant received an unexpected visit from a corporate representative. Policies were reviewed. Training programs were introduced. Renovations were planned to ensure accessibility wasn't an afterthought, but a priority. And quietly, behind the scenes, a partnership opportunity appeared, one that could elevate the restaurant's reputation beyond anything it had known. The manager never fully understood why. But Sorelle did. And so did Elian, eventually. Because one afternoon, weeks later, he received an invitation. Not to a restaurant. But to an office overlooking the city. When he arrived, unsure and slightly out of place, he found Sorelle waiting. This time, there was no hesitation. No guarded politeness. Just honesty. She thanked him. Not for what he had done, but for why he had done it. For seeing her as a person first. For not assuming. For standing up when it would have been easier to walk away. And then she offered him something unexpected. Not charity. Opportunity. A position within her company, one that valued his integrity more than any resume could. At first, he hesitated. Life had taught him to be cautious. But then he looked at Maris. And he thought about the future. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to imagine something different. Something better. Years later, the story would be told in quiet ways. Not as a grand tale of transformation, but as a simple truth. That sometimes, the smallest acts of courage create the biggest ripples. That standing up for one person can change more lives than you ever see. And that kindness, real, inconvenient, unwavering kindness, still has the power to rewrite endings. If this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that good people still exist. And before we close, here's a special request. Comment the word courage if you believe one small act can change everything. Because somewhere out there, someone is waiting for a moment like this. A moment where someone chooses to stand. Just like he did.